I've been wanting to take some space to talk about PNES and domestic violence and why my content is why my content is. So I have developed PNES, which are psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, but this is just as prevalent as multiple sclerosis, but it has much less exposure. So this is more for an awareness because I didn't realize how susceptible I was to developing PNES, and it's not something that is talked about really at all. So when you break it down, psychogenic non-epileptic seizures in the past have been called hysteria seizures. So from its origin, somebody with a body disorder or a movement disorder was more or less hysterical. And that is how our body deals with trauma sometimes. So the hysterics were more traumatized than anything else, at least back then. So then it's been called pseudo seizures, which is outdated because it implies that it's faked. And I can assure you it's not, because I have spent a lot of my time figuring out how I lost control of my body. So when you break down PNES, it is a psychological conflict that comes out as a movement disorder. It comes out in a physical reaction. It's associated with epilepsy only because it's misdiagnosed as epilepsy quite a bit. But it's non-epileptic, which means that there's not random misfirings. There is something psychological triggering your body to do that. And it can mimic any type of epileptic seizure. So there's multiple types of movement disorders and seizures, but some people are flailing on the ground, some people fall. I've kind of dealt with falling. There is like a sudden loss of muscle tone in my legs sometimes when I'm startled, because I have an exaggerated startle response as well as everything else. So when you have PNES and somebody startles you, you can act in a variety of ways, but I have fallen to the ground several occasions. And that's the most embarrassing part about it, is that some people laugh and think it's funny, and I just have to brush it off. But it's not something that I did on purpose. It is completely involuntary, where I will be perfectly fine and then something will startle me and my legs feel like jello and I fall on my butt. So that is something that, does impact my life, but not as much as I know that these types of things impact others. I more see it as a mannerism from my perspective now than anything else. But it keeps my body tense. It keeps me in hypervigilance. And my window of tolerance is a little bit different. So talking about PNES, I developed this because I had a mental conflict. Do I stay or do I go in the name of safety? I was with somebody for a long time, and when the gun started coming out and waved in my face, I knew, you gotta go. It's time to go. Go. But my heart wouldn't leave. Which side is my heart on? Right here. My heart wouldn't leave. And I didn't love myself enough to choose myself over this person I had spent a lot of time on. So as it progressed, I kept losing myself and I didn't have a voice. And when you don't speak up about these things and you swallow them and you don't fight back and you don't say what you mean, it comes out in your body. And my mind was telling me, go to safety. You are not safe here. And I just wouldn't go. So I was having this huge inner conflict. And as the days passed and it got worse, I have become part of this category of CPTSD because it is not a single instance. It was a prolonged exposure to gun violence. And when you're like me and it's hard to give up on people, it wasn't until my body made me leave that I actually did. And that took a long time. I remember being in my living room just kind of staring at my finger, wondering why my finger wouldn't stop fucking moving, and I didn't tell it to. So there's different types of, seizures, because moving a finger isn't a seizure. It's more like a tic. And that's what was happening to me in like the day to day, where I would just be like I would just like have a shoulder shrug and my fingers would just go. And then, if somebody startled me, I'd just be like, woo, and I'd fall to the ground. And other people don't do that. It was something that I was embarrassed by, but you don't really notice unless you're around me a lot. But PTSD is not reserved for just people in the military. It can happen to anybody at any age. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you think you know, because the body keeps the score. And over the years, I have learned about PNES, and it still didn't stop it. It was like, no matter how smart I got, my body was like, I'm not impressed. Like, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. It wasn't until I had a brain aneurysm that they were actually able to fix my PNES with an antidepressant. I had a chemical imbalance, low on serotonin, and for the most part, my body tics have gone away. So I feel thankful that I can actually step out of the past, because that's kind of what was keeping me there, because every time it happened, I knew why. And it's like nobody else in this room knows why, but I know why. And I never got to express how I felt about it or process it even. And so I just stayed in this state for like 6 years. And that's a really long time to just like be jumpy and freaking out everywhere. So I just want to talk about how domestic violence is something that is preventable. It is something that you can coach people to avoid. You can, really just express an out. I think a lot of people that are in domestic violence situations don't feel like there's an out. They are either like financially dependent or, just too connected kids. Like there's multiple reasons why people stay in situations that, don't respect their boundaries. And I don't want other people to develop PNES because it's something that's preventable. PNES is a reaction to trauma. It is how some people deal with trauma. And so if you kind of minimize the amount of trauma that is inflicted on the people in the world and you focus more on healing, then you have less people that are susceptible to the trauma, and then what happens in the years after the trauma, kind of the lasting effects. If I could change anything, I don't think I would, because PNES and the development of this higher purpose, I feel like I have a higher calling after trauma, after gun violence, where now I need to speak. Now I need to really, help others by telling my story and feeling like what I have to say needs to be heard.